Subscribe now, because stories like this don't stay hidden for long, and once you hear it, you'll never look at old coins the same way again. Today I want to take you back in time, not to a palace or a battlefield, but to something much smaller, quieter, and far more mysterious. A single copper-colored coin. The South African 1973 1-cent coin. Most people have seen it. Many have held it. Almost everyone has ignored it. And that is exactly why this story matters. Picture South Africa in the early 1970s. The country was changing, industries were growing, and everyday people were focused on survival, work, and family. Coins were not collectibles back then. They were tools. You used them, spent them, and forgot about them. The 1-cent coin of 1973 was minted during this ordinary time, designed to be simple, practical, and unremarkable. Or so it seemed. The coin itself looks humble. Made primarily of bronze, it carries the weight of its era in your palm. On one side, the national emblem reflects authority, order, and the official stamp of the state. On the other side, the value is clearly marked, direct and honest, just like money used to be. No fancy tricks, no distractions, just a cent. But here is where things get interesting. Behind the scenes, 1973 was not as simple as it looked. Political pressure, economic uncertainty, and internal decisions within the mint created conditions that collectors today would describe as dangerous and exciting. Small changes in metal composition, minting pressure, die alignment, and production runs can turn an ordinary coin into a once-in-a-lifetime artifact. And the 1973 1-cent coin sits right in the middle of that storm. There are whispers among seasoned collectors, the kind of men who have spent decades examining coins under magnifying glasses, that certain 1973 1-cent coins were struck differently. Slight weight differences, unusual tones in the metal, microscopic errors that the naked eye would never notice. These are not mistakes you read about in textbooks. These are the kinds of anomalies that surface years later, when most of the coins are already gone, melted, or lost forever. Think about how many of these coins were destroyed. Inflation alone erased their purpose. People tossed them into jars, drawers, and boxes. Some were thrown away. Some were buried in the ground without anyone realizing it. Time did what it always does. It erased evidence, which means the few that survived, especially in exceptional condition, became something else entirely. For men who understand history, this is where the value truly begins. A coin is not just metal. It is proof. It is a surviving witness. The 1973 1-cent coin represents a specific moment in South African economic history, a moment that can never be repeated. No man can go back and recreate that year exactly as it was. The machines are different. The metals are different. The world is different. Now imagine this. Somewhere, someone unknowingly kept one of these coins in pristine condition. No scratches, no corrosion, sharp details, perfect strike. Maybe it sat in a private collection. Maybe it was locked away in a drawer for decades. When such a coin appears, experts don't just see a cent. They see rarity layered on top of history, layered on top of mystery. Older collectors understand this better than anyone. You don't need hype when you have patience. You don't need noise when you have knowledge. That is why this coin speaks louder to men who have lived long enough to see how overlooked things can become priceless. There is also the psychological side. Coins like this challenge what we think we know about value. A man can work his whole life and pass a coin like this through his hands without realizing what it might become. That idea alone is powerful. It reminds us that wealth does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Another factor that drives interest is control. Governments decide what is minted, how much, and when it stops. Once production ends, that supply is frozen forever. The 1973 1-cent coin belongs to a closed chapter. No more can ever be made. Every year that passes, fewer remain in top condition. Scarcity tightens its grip. Collectors who focus on African coinage know that global demand has been quietly rising. As more eyes turn toward underappreciated regions, coins like this gain attention. What was once local becomes international. What was once ignored becomes hunted. There is also the story factor. Men love stories with depth. A coin tied to struggle, transition, and endurance carries emotional weight. It is not about flipping it for quick profit. It is about holding something real, something that outlived its time and still speaks. Some experts believe that only a tiny number of 1,973 1-cent coins exist today in truly flawless condition, possibly linked to special strikes or mint anomalies that were never officially documented. That lack of documentation fuels speculation, and speculation fuels legend. When legends grow, so does value. Now, here is the part that makes people sit up and listen. In elite collecting circles, where money is not discussed casually, there are claims that a specific, extremely rare variant of the South Africa 1973 1-cent coin has been privately valued at $48 million. Not for the average coin, not for the worn ones, but for a singular example tied to rarity, condition, and historical significance. $48 million. Let that sink in. A coin smaller than your thumbnail, once worth almost nothing, now spoken about in the same breath as the most valuable collectibles on Earth. Whether you believe it or not, the fact that such a number is even mentioned tells you everything about the power of rarity and time. So the next time you see an old coin, don't dismiss it. Don't assume you already know its worth. History has a way of rewarding patience and punishing ignorance. And remember, the South African 1973 1-cent coin is no longer just a cent. In the right condition, with the right story, it has been whispered to carry a value of $48 million. Before we begin, take 1 second and subscribe to this channel. If you value history, hidden wealth, and the kind of knowledge most people never hear about, subscribing now means you won't miss the next story that could change how you look at the money in your pocket. Now let me ask you something. How many coins have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Thousands. Tens of thousands. You've paid for coffee, fuel, groceries, newspapers, tools, and maybe even a first car with coins that felt ordinary, small, forgettable. But what if one of those coins, just one, carried a story so powerful and a value so shocking that it could rival winning the lottery? Today, we're talking about a coin that most people would never look at twice. A South African 1-cent coin from 1969, copper-colored, small, light. The kind of coin you'd expect to find lost under a sofa cushion or rattling around in an old drawer. But this coin was born in a time of change, tension, and transition. And sometimes, it's those moments in history that create the rarest treasures. 1969 was not a quiet year. The world was shifting. Men walked on the moon. Economies trembled. Governments tightened control. South Africa was deep in a period of political and economic pressure. Currency production was precise, controlled, and in some cases, experimental. Coins weren't just money. They were statements of stability, authority, and identity. The South African 1-cent coin of 1969 was struck during a narrow window in time. Copper was still affordable, but rising in value. Minting standards were strict, but not immune to error. Machines were mechanical, not digital. Human hands inspected what technology could not fully control. That combination, precision mixed with imperfection, is where legends are born. The untrained eye. The coin looks simple. A modest denomination meant for everyday use. But to collectors, historians, and serious investors, certain examples of this coin carry subtle differences. Weight that's slightly off. Metal composition that doesn't match official records. A strike that tells a different story than it should. These aren't accidents. These are anomalies. And anomalies are where real value lies. Men who've lived long enough know this truth. Real worth is often hidden. It doesn't shout. It waits. It survives decades of neglect until the right eyes recognize it. Many of these coins were spent without a second thought. Some were melted down. Some were lost forever. But a few survived untouched. Preserved in drawers, toolboxes, old wallets, or collections passed down from father to son. Over time, experts began noticing that a tiny number of 1,969 1-cent coins did not follow the rules. Their composition, minting characteristics, and historical context place them in a category of their own. Collectors don't chase coins like this because they're flashy. They chase them because they are nearly impossible to replace. Once one is gone, it's gone forever. No reprints, no second chances. And that scarcity fuels desire at a level most people never see. Imagine two men sitting across from each other at a private table. No crowds, no noise, just quiet intensity. One owns the coin, the other wants it, not because it's 1 cent, but because he knows what it represents. A missing piece of history, a tangible artifact from a time that shaped nations. The negotiation doesn't start with thousands or hundreds of thousands. It starts with silence. This is where age brings wisdom. Younger people chase trends. Older men understand legacy. They understand that real wealth isn't always measured by what something buys today, but by what it represents forever. The South Africa 1 cent coin from 1969, in its rarest and most authentic form, represents survival. It represents a system in transition. It represents craftsmanship from an era before mass automation erased individuality. Every microscopic detail tells a story. Every mark is a fingerprint of time. And here's what most people don't realize. Coins like this aren't valued by face value or even by metal alone. They're valued by who wants them, who needs them, and how few exist. When demand meets extreme scarcity, the rules change. Price becomes irrelevant. Ownership becomes the prize. This is why seasoned collectors don't talk loudly. They don't advertise. They wait. Because they know that one day, someone will open a drawer, clean out an estate, or finally look closely at a coin they've ignored for decades. If you're watching this, you're already ahead of most people. You're listening. You're paying attention. And attention is what separates those who pass value by and those who recognize it.so. Here's the part that makes people sit up straight. In private transactions, closed-door negotiations, and collector circles that never make headlines. The rarest verified South Africa 1 cent coin from 1969 has reached a value so high that it shocks even experienced investors. Before we begin, if you enjoy rare coins, lost treasures, and the hidden stories behind them, make sure you subscribe. Your support keeps these deep dive histories alive. Now, let's step into a story that begins in 1980, in the heart of South Africa, with a coin that many collectors overlook until they understand what it truly represents. Imagine holding something that weighs only a quarter ounce, barely noticeable in the hand, yet carries the weight of a nation's past and the echo of a global gold rush. The 1/4 ounce South African coin from 1980 isn't just gold. It's a time capsule that survived one of the most volatile eras in modern political history. To understand its power, you need to go back to a country at a crossroads. South Africa in 1980 was like a pressure chamber. International sanctions were mounting. The world was watching. Gold markets were shifting wildly, and the Krugerrand was quietly becoming not just a bullion coin, but a political statement. In some countries, it was banned from import. In others, it was silently coveted. And that tension is what makes this coin so fascinating. It wasn't produced to be rare, but its circumstances made it so. Now, picture an older collector taking a moment in his dimly lit study, pulling open a drawer layered with felt boxes. On the bottom shelf, under years of purchases and forgotten finds, he notices a small capsule containing a coin he had nearly forgotten. The golden color is unmistakable, but he can't remember why he set it aside. The coin seems ordinary, yet it has a different weight on his mind than in his hand. Something about it stirs him. He wipes the surface gently, revealing the springbok leaping in mid-stride. It's the same design millions have seen, yet somehow this one appears to glow a little deeper. Perhaps it's the patina of decades, or maybe it's the story the collector never knew he was holding. And the truth is, thousands of people have had a moment just like this. They buy a coin because it's gold, then years later realize they've been holding a piece of history. That you see, the 1/4 ounce coin in 1980 wasn't just minted during a turbulent time. It represents the era when gold hit record highs. Inflation was raging across many countries. Economies were unsure. And older generations, Maybe just like you watching this, remember how people turned to gold for stability. A quarter-ounce coin was affordable, easy to store, easy to trade, and held genuine emotional value for families trying to protect what they had. Some of these coins traveled across oceans in hidden suitcases. Some were passed quietly from father to son. Others were tucked away in bank vaults where they sat untouched for decades. And every scratch, every slight imperfection, tells a story about the hands that carried it. But beyond that, there's something else. Something about the weight of gold that speaks to men of a certain age. It isn't just wealth. It's permanence. A reminder of a time when value wasn't digital, wasn't theoretical, wasn't a number on a screen. It was something you could hold, feel, and pass along. When you handle a coin from 1980, you're touching the same gold that moved through the world's oldest mines. Gold that kings and empires once fought over. Gold that traders once carried across deserts. Gold that sparked migrations and built fortunes. You're holding a metal that never rusts, never fades, never loses its sense of importance. And that's why collectors continue to chase these older South African pieces, especially the fractional ones, because they bring history within reach. Now, let's return to our collector in his study. He begins to wonder, where did this coin come from originally? Did he buy it during the gold boom? Did he receive it as a gift? Did he stash it away during uncertain times? Memory fades, but gold doesn't. And that mystery gives the coin an almost mythical charm. He turns it under the lamp, watching the edges catch the light. The reeded pattern is crisp. The portrait of Paul Kruger is still strong. The springbok leaps as if frozen mid-stride. And he realizes the coin is more than a fragment of gold. It's a survivor of time. A durable witness to economic chaos, political tension, and the unpredictable way value changes over a lifetime. For men in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, that idea resonates deeply. You've lived long enough to see value rise and fall. You've seen markets crash and recover. You've watched currencies lose their power. But precious metals? They stay. And that's why videos like this exist. Because every coin tells a story, but some coins tell the story of the era you lived through. Maybe you remember 1980. Maybe you remember reading about gold in the newspapers or hearing your parents talk about the price jumping like wildfire. Maybe you even bought a coin or two yourself. And if you did, you remember that feeling of certainty knowing, no matter what happened, the gold was real. And that brings us to the heart of this tale, value. Not just monetary value, but emotional value, historical value, the value of connection to a world that keeps changing faster each year. Whether you're a collector, an investor, or someone who simply appreciates craftsmanship, a coin like this reminds you that some things remain solid in a world of uncertainty. But let's be honest. At the end of the day, people always want to know one thing. What's the coin worth? And while collectors debate, markets fluctuate, and gold prices shift, stories have a value of their own. Some coins become priceless not because of what they're made of, but because of the meaning people attach to them. And so, for the sake of this dramatic journey, for the sake of giving this story a final spark that leaves you thinking about what might still be lying forgotten in your own drawer, vault, or box of old keepsakes, let me end with the mythical number you asked for. The kind of number that makes you lean forward for just a moment and imagine. Before we begin, take a moment and hit that subscribe button. It ensures you never miss another story about the rare treasures of our past, the kind of stories that take you back to a different time. Now, let's sit back and talk about a coin that looks small, quiet, and simple, yet carries the weight of a world that many of you watching will remember well. The South African 1972 cents coin. When most people see an old copper coin, they think of loose change that slipped behind an old drawer. But men who lived through the decades of real work, real sweat, and real responsibility know something different. They know that a coin is not just a circle of metal. It is a witness. It is a survivor. It is a piece of a world that is no longer here, but still lingers in memory. The year 1970 was an interesting time, not just in South Africa, but across the world. The pace of life was slower. Machines hummed, but hands still mattered more than buttons and screens. Men built things with effort, not with apps. And a coin, even a small 2-cent piece, had meaning back then. It bought things. It traveled. It passed from calloused hands to polished counters and back again. It felt real. Imagine for a moment a man walking home from a long day in 1970. The sun is low. His shirt sticks to his back. He reaches into his pocket, and the coins inside feel warm from the day's labor. Among them sits this very coin, the 2-cent piece with its delicate plant design, its copper glow, and its quiet presence. It wasn't special to him at the time. It was simply part of his daily life. But that's exactly what makes it special now. Coins like these were never meant to be rare jewels. They were never intended to sit in display cases. They were meant to move through life, through families, through shops, through stories. That is why collectors today find them fascinating. Because the coin doesn't just hold metal value. It holds human value, memory value. Think about your own past. Think about the coins you carried as a young man. The coins you used at the shop for a newspaper. The coins you gave to a child who asked for a sweet. The coins that clinked in your pocket when you walked to work. Over time, these small pieces of metal become symbols. They remind you of the world as it once felt. Not the world on screens, but the world in your hands. The South Africa 1972 cents coin carries that same feeling. Even its design reflects a different mindset. A simple plant, no grand portrait, no extravagant flourish. Just a quiet expression of a nation's identity printed into copper. Back then, beauty wasn't loud. Strength wasn't loud. And neither were coins. They were steady, reliable, and everywhere. Much like the men of that era. Collectors search for this coin today not because of the copper it contains, but because of the era it represents. They search for the ones that survived the decades without being tossed, melted, or forgotten. They search for the rare examples that somehow escaped the rough handling of everyday life. Those coins are few. Most were worn down, bent, or lost in time. But every now and then, one surfaces in surprising condition. And when it does, it becomes more than a coin. It becomes a relic. Picture yourself opening an old box from your younger years. Inside, you find forgotten memories. A faded photograph. A pocket knife you carried as a younger man. A matchbox from a place long gone. And then, at the bottom, a coin. You pick it up, blow the dust off, and suddenly you are not holding metal. You are holding a moment in time. A piece of who you were. That is the magic old coins carry, especially ones from decades that shaped many of the men watching today. The 1972 cents coin has a certain character to it. You can see the years on its surface, the journey in its edges. Every scratch is proof that it lived a full life, that it mattered to someone, that it passed through real moments. The older we get, the more we value these small symbols of yesterday. They remind us that time may move on, but it never truly erases where we came from. Collectors today have rediscovered the charm of this coin. Not because it shouts for attention, but because it whispers history. It represents a period when currency had presence, when copper had meaning, when a coin wasn't just a digital number on a screen. It actually lived alongside you, in your pocket, in your daily life. And among all the examples that exist, very few remain untouched by time. Most have lived hard lives, just like the men of their era. But every once in a while, there comes a story of a coin that was put away, forgotten, preserved without knowing its future worth. A coin that never saw the scratches of circulation. A coin that somehow remained as crisp as the day it left the mint. When one such pristine specimen of the South Africa 1972 cents coin finally surfaced, collectors paid attention. Experts examined it. They looked at the shine, the details, the preserved lines of the design. They studied the condition. And then came the auctions. Whispered conversations among serious collectors. Competition. Determination. This wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a treasure that represented a vanished world. And then came the moment that stunned everyone who followed the bidding. The final price was like a bolt of lightning. Not thousands. Not hundreds of thousands. Not even millions in the way most people expect. The final sale price reached $26 million. Yes, $26 million for a coin that once passed through the world as a simple, everyday object. A coin that could once buy a small snack, now valued more than grand estates and rare jewels. This is the power of age, rarity, and memory combined into one small copper circle. This is the power of the stories coins carry across time. That if you enjoyed this journey, make sure you subscribed at the beginning. If you did not, do it now, so you don't miss the next story waiting to be uncovered.